These fucking games.
Everybody's thinking about me, but I feel alright. Everybody's out again, but I feel alright.
Horror games are in need of a new shake-up, like they had when Amnesia took everyone by storm and presented this first-person helpless horror experience, and then a whole bunch of developers copied it and ran it into the ground. And Layers of Fear is one such series that was part of that whole rush. A few years ago, the first Layers of Fear came out. It was okay. It was fine, but it didn't do much to stand out, and it undercut its own horror by the fact there was no real game over to speak of. So all of the threats it tried to spook you with had all of their teeth removed, essentially. Layers of Fear addresses that part, at least. There are threats in this game that can kill you, although they do so in the most annoying ways possible. And they seem to be thrown in just to pay lip service to the whole idea. It's really not all that good, if I'm being perfectly honest with you. And that's Layers of Fear 2 all around. I really hoped that it would be a vast improvement on the first one, that it wouldn't just be merely all right, but it's not even that this time, because there's no excuse. The fact that it retreads so much familiar ground is inexcusable. Horror needs to move on from the worn-out tropes that were worn out when the first Layers of Fear came out, let alone this sequel. And you know the kind of tropes I'm talking about. First of all, the whole no combat, I'm helpless, a monster catches me and I'm dead thing has been done so many times now, and better. You know, Outlast did it better, Amnesia, of course, did it better, Alien Isolation did it better in the moments where it did that, and even then, at points, it gave you a bit more to do than just run and hide. Layers of Fear 2 has no interest in evolving the mechanics of the first-person horror experience whatsoever. It's full of the same scares we've seen before, the usual jump scares that are just loud noises. They're not really scary, they're not spooky, they're not atmospheric, they're just loud noises designed to startle you. Just, oh, there's a noise, scary, right? Not really, it gets so boring and predictable. And there are all the other ones as well, like you walk down a corridor, and then you turn around, and the corridor you walk down looks different, and now it's a new area. Or, oh, I'm trying to open a door and it's locked. What if I just walk back a bit, turn around and walk back? Will I open it then? Oh, yes, I will. Of course I will. Now I'm going to wander around reading notes. Just notes everywhere, because of course. And rather than have simple controls that make sense and are intuitive and are convenient, it does that whole thing of manually holding a button and pulling the controls to open a door, which are always awkward and feel silly, and in some cases in Layers of Fear 2, they straight up don't work. I've had issues where I cannot get a door to open properly, which, if you're being chased by the formless, pointless thing that chases you sometimes, that gets very annoying very quickly. Despite a few interesting pieces of imagery here and there, Layers of Fear 2 is very much like its predecessor in that it's a by-the-numbers, a strictly by-the-numbers horror experience, hitting all of the familiar notes that have been hit over and over again by games over the past 10 years or so, I guess now. And to top it all off, for the most part, the game is ugly. Just ugly, and I'm not talking about the graphics, not on a raw technical level anyway. It's the piss-poor visual art style, the art direction's all to cock. When there's full colour and it's lit decently enough, the game looks okay. Some of the early segments that take part in well-lit areas look fine, but for the most part, it's black and white, or it's in shades of brown, and the screen frequently blurs and looks contorted and twisted, presumably to create a spooky atmosphere, but it just hurts your eyes. I get migraines in real life. I don't need visual representations of them constantly while I'm playing, which combined with the awful, loud, screechy noises that are designed to startle you, make for an audio-visual nightmare, and not in a fun horror way, in a I don't want to play this game anymore way. The developers at Bloober Team clearly love their horror games, and they're not interested in reinventing the wheel, but there's a difference between deciding not to reinvent the wheel and deciding to hump the wheel until the spokes fall off. And that is, unfortunately, the route that Layers of Fear 2 takes. It's just exhausting in its lack of vision, in its lack of ambition, and it's unpleasant to watch, it's unpleasant to look at, it's unpleasant to play for the most part. It's slow, it's sluggish, it's dull. The story meanders, the voice acting, what there is of it, isn't very good. It's very stodgy and stoic. And whenever they hit upon one idea, each chapter usually hits upon one gimmick, and it'll run that gimmick into the ground. What we're about to see is the gimmick that happens toward the tail end of one level, where you're avoiding these blasts of fiery light, and you just end up doing that over and over again, and it's not engaging. You're just waiting for something to happen, then running a bit. There's a similar thing that happens with spotlights, where you've got to wait for spotlights to move, and then you run across in the dark to avoid them. And they're just repeated ad nauseum. They completely outstay their welcome. Something like this only needs to happen maybe 5 times throughout the course of a game. Doesn't need to keep happening, but it keeps banging this drum. And why? What was so good about this that they had to keep doing it? Not a lot. It's rubbish. Especially when you think you can hide behind a fence and the fence blows up and then that's it. And then you've got to do it again. I'm disappointed. Because Layers of Fear, the original, had something to it. This idea of a painter going a bit weird and you walking around this freaky house with all the canvas and paint aesthetic. There was something to it. It was just a bit dull for the most part. It dragged, and like I said, the horror was toothless because there was no real threat. And you can make that work. You can make atmosphere work. Gone Home, before it became apparent what was going on in the game, had some real atmosphere to it because you were not sure what was going to happen. But before too long, with Layers of Fear, the first one, it became far too obvious that nothing was going to happen to you, that nothing was really that scary. Some of the stuff that happened could affect the endings, but you didn't really know that while you were playing it, so it had no effect. With Layers of Fear 2, I was hoping they'd learn from some of the criticisms of the first game, and they have, but they seem to have taken not the wrong lessons, but they've learned the lessons the wrong way. People were a bit disappointed that you couldn't die in the game. Okay, well then let's just throw in some cheap deaths here and there. In a dull way that seems to exist just to pay lip service to the idea. Yeah, let's have you chased by some inscrutable black and white monster, and when it catches you, it'll go so loud to the point where I am yelling at the TV, shut up, it's too loud. I wish I actually still had footage of that bit. I lost a whole bunch of footage of this game when I was recording for it, which meant I had to play more of it. And that isn't a good time for me. I guarantee you, once this video's up, I'm deleting it off my PS4 because I'm not interested in playing any more of this. I played Outlast already, and that was 10 times better than this. I've played Amnesia. You don't need Layers of Fear. And the thing is, I want to need Layers of Fear. I want to whenever they have scraps of some artistic fascination. Like this is some fun imagery. We've got these 2 mannequins playing cards. There's some good stuff they do with mannequins, although, in horror games, mannequins are already overdone. But at least they were relatively... They do some fun things there, here and there. But overall, it's an also-ran. It's unnecessary to ever... You never need to play this game. I can tell you that much. If you're a horror aficionado, if you decide not to play this one, you will miss precisely nothing. And that is a shame. I don't enjoy, tearing Layers of Fear apart. Layer, if you will, by layer. But I have to, because it's with 2 games now, it's now a routine disappointment with Layers of Fear. I keep expecting something more dramatic, more bombastic, more original from these games, and now that they've had 2 cracks at the whip, I see that I would be wasting my time to expect much more. Fortunately, we had Resident Evil 2 come out earlier this year, which actually does feel fresh and interesting and an exciting entry into the horror genre. And if Blooper Team want to, start copying other horror games, maybe they should look in that direction rather than this sleepily wearisome direction.